Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris. I am your host. We are going to continue with The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. We left off pages 70 through 90 is where we left off. We're going to be discussing that today, tonight, wherever you are. And these pages were kind of interesting. We start to delve into alchemy. The title of this book, The Alchemist, we haven't really met yet who the alchemist is. Besides what was in that introduction, those first couple pages, we still haven't really heard anything about alchemy, the alchemist, up until those last few pages from last time, 68, 69. We found out the new character was introduced, the Englishman, and he was studying alchemy. He's on a journey to get to this oasis in the middle of the Sahara, or not in the middle of the Sahara, but he's going to travel through the Sahara to find this alchemist so he can find the Philosopher's Stone. That's his goal. So this is where we're first introduced to it. And now in 70 through 90, we're going to start to gather more information on possibly like who exactly the Englishman is, but kind of what he's all about. So let's start things off. Page 70. And remember, the Englishman and the little boy, Santiago, where we left off was that they were in this warehouse, that Santiago knew of the warehouse because of the crystal merchant. That's where the crystal merchant would house, or that was a routing location for crystal that he remembered from working with the crystal merchant. The Englishman is there again because he needs to get across the Sahara Desert. He's got to get to that oasis, right? So we find them here kind of in this warehouse mulling around. Santiago tries to start a conversation with the Englishman. Englishman doesn't really want any part of it. He just wants to be deep in his books. And remember, we talked about how similarly the king, the Salem king, interrupted Santiago, and Santiago didn't really want anything to do with him. And then he was trying to just read his book and go about his business. So it's kind of mirrors that in a way. So we leave off here, page 70. Let's kick things off here. Santiago's trying to read. He's saying something about it's hard to concentrate. I'm sure it is, because he's kind of having doubts, and we all kind of have these doubts. It says here he still had some doubts about the decision he had made. But you ultimately become at peace once you go ahead and move forward from that decision, right? You might have doubts about the results, but you're at peace because at least you know you're moving towards something, moving forward towards something. You're not just standing still. That would cause more anxiety. But at least Santiago made the conscious decision, hey, let's try and get to the pyramids. This is a way to get there via Caravan. And, the fact that I had this relationship with the crystal merchant has the relationship with the warehouse that sends out caravans, it's an omen. And what we find out about the Englishman here is the Englishman knows a lot about these things. He knows about omens, knows a little bit about alchemy. And then Santiago whips out, reaches in his pockets for, remember those two omen stones, Urim and Thummim? And the Englishman recognizes them right away. Right, so he knows about those omen stones. He actually, if we turn the page, he actually has some of his own. He reaches in his pocket and he pulls out the same, maybe not the same, but similar stones. He says that it's from the Bible. Priests carried them in a golden breastplate. And remember, I wonder if I have it right here, this slide. Remember how the Salem king gave Santiago the stones from his gold breastplate. The Salem king had a very similar thing. So what are we saying here? Well, for one, how does the Englishman know all this? How did he get his omen stones? Did he get it from the king as well? Remember the king when he was overlooking the area, the surrounding area around him, right after he leaves Santiago, right after he takes the part of his flock of sheep, and he references a guy, I think his name was Andrew. He's like, comparing the Santiago situation to Andrew. So he's kind of done this thing before. Could it be that the Englishman is just part of one of many young men that the Salem king has given stones to? Possibly. I don't really know yet, but the Englishman knows a lot. The Englishman knows about omens. He says that everything in life is an omen. There's a universal language understood by everybody, but already forgotten. I am in search of that universal language. That's why I'm here. I have to find a man who knows the universal language, an alchemist. I skipped a slide here. What do we know about the Englishman? Well, based on what we know, okay, these first couple pages and then like 68 through 70, he's trying to find the Philosopher's Stone. He is trying to find the Philosopher's Stone by finding this famous alchemist who is allegedly at the Al Fayoum Oasis in the Sahara. The Englishman himself seems like he's very well read. He studied other subjects before, but now he's studying alchemy. So, in a way, Santiago and the Englishman are both looking for their own personal legend. Right? They're both trying to accomplish this thing. But they come from, it's seemingly different backgrounds. When you hear the Englishman, this kind of illustrates something in your mind of like royalty or somebody who is of higher status. What do we know about Santiago? Santiago, shepherd, came from a small village. Parents wanted to go him to go into the church. So they're both trying to go towards a personal legend, but they both come from different backgrounds. The Englishman knows about this universal language. He references it here. Santiago, I wonder if I have this on the next slide. Right here. Santiago speaks a lot about language. Think about this. Santiago references that he spoke a certain language with his sheep. Not of words, but his sheep intuitively would follow Santiago because they trusted him so much, and they understood that he was trying to take care of them. He was leading them to food, to shelter. They trusted him. He had a special language with them. Think about when Santiago travels first to Africa. He's in a foreign land. He doesn't know how to speak the language there. The bar owner is seemingly trying to warn him of the newcomer. But he doesn't speak the bar owner's language. He thinks the bar owner is the bad guy here, trying to take his money. And the newcomer uses the common language. The newcomer knew Spanish. He uses that common language to seduce Santiago into trust. A lot at work here with this universal language. So what happens? A fat Arab comes in. I'm not joking. That's what it says there. And he says that they are in luck. There's a caravan leaving. They're both going to get on board. Englishman says, hey, this is a good omen. Why are you going on this trip? You know, the Englishman asks if he's also searching for the alchemist. And Santiago says, no, I'm looking for my treasure. He's careful. Remember with the newcomer, he didn't tell the newcomer about the treasure? I don't think he did. And it's seemingly like he's regretting telling the Englishman about it. But the Englishman seems to not really care about it. So that's interesting there. The newcomer who Santiago seemed like, I don't think Santiago wanted to believe the newcomer. Remember, he said he wanted to ask for his money back from the newcomer, but he never did. He obviously has a different feeling with the Englishman. I don't think he thinks the Englishman is out to rob him or do him wrong here. So they start on the caravan. What do we know about the caravan? Journey begins. The caravan, it's a group of a lot of people, around 200 people and around 400 animals. Camels, horses, mules, fowl. And the driver of the caravan, or the leader of the caravan, is kind of explaining to him the rules of the desert. And he says, you know, there's a lot of people here. Each one has his own God, but I only follow one God. I follow Allah, so, you know, safe to assume that he's Muslim. But I want each of you to swear by the God you believe in that you will follow my orders no matter what. Seems like this is the only rule when you're traveling. Follow the orders of the leader of the caravan, because if you don't, in the desert, disobedience means death. So they're on this journey. Santiago makes a point here, thinks about a chain that links things together. So he mentions that, you know, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Or this is what the Englishman says. And Santiago starts to think, well, okay, there's no such thing as a coincidence. How I was traveling, I met this gypsy, I met this king, they tell me of a personal legend. I'm in Africa, I get my sheep stolen, I work for this merchant. I meet the Englishman, he's talking about alchemy, he knows about omens, he knows about this universal language. And Santiago describes this as like a chain. Everything is linked together. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is linked. One hand washes the other. And everything is to get you to get closer to your personal legend. All right. Remember, all the universe conspires to help you realize your personal legend. It's not saying that it's going to be easy, but the obstacle is the way. The universe will help you out in that regard. Again, not saying it's going to be easy. What do we got here? The desert is big. So let's continue on. Let's continue on. The desert is big. Yes, it is. If you guys have not seen pictures of the Sahara, it's like basically all of northern Africa. Vast expanse. I can't imagine traveling through that. He's talking to a guy here about like the vastness of the desert and how it makes a person feel so small to the point where you just have to be so silent. And I ask a question here in my slide, where else have you experienced this? And perhaps you've experienced this while just hanging out on the beach at an ocean, looking out at the vastness of the ocean. Maybe up from like a mountaintop, looking at the Grand Canyon. Just where something that humbles you into realizing how small and fragile you really are. Reminds me of, and I put this quote here, where one cannot speak, one must be silent. I think that was from Wittgenstein, Ludwig von Wittgenstein, who had a quote about a ladder and how, I don't want to get down this rabbit hole, but he had a quote about a ladder and how once you climb the ladder, you got to throw it away and surmount the propositions. There's no going back, kind of. That's for another day, though. Santiago mentioned something here about learning. So how he's learned from his sheep. I'm sure he learned a lot from the crystal merchant. He learned about trust and the newcomer that stole his money. Now he's going to learn a lot about the desert, but what do you think Santiago is going to learn from the desert? Probably the fact that you shouldn't go too far away from the caravan. Right? Disobedience means death. You shouldn't. You should always keep moving forward. Follow the stars. They're going to mention how the path that they are following on the desert, they are following a star. So don't veer off the path. All of this is kind of like allegorical to your personal legend. Keep on the path towards your personal legend. Don't fall off the path too much. Maintain your focus. And don't be led astray. And Santiago continues, let's continue on here. He starts to have some like second thoughts. Almost kind of like this reminds me of A Christmas Story where the guy is imagining like if he had never been born. And Santiago is starting to feel like kind of the same thing. He's starting to think like, well, my sheep, I wonder how they're feeling. Well, they're probably doing great. They've forgotten about me. The merchant's daughter, she's probably doing fine. She met a baker. She's doing fine without me. He's starting to get like a little negative here. And he says something here. The boy was beginning to understand that intuition is really a sudden immersion of the soul into the universal current of life, where all histories of people are connected. It's all written there, maktub. Remember what that means. It is written. He says about his mother used to call these things hunches, where the past and the present are kind of like connected. And his mom called them hunches. It's an interesting way to put it. So these were things that I had already mentioned, how they are following a star. You got to overcome an obstacle, stay on the course. It's interesting as we kind of shift from Santiago to the Englishman at times. And the Englishman doesn't really seem to care about the desert, about really talking to anybody. He's very interested in his books. And this kind of alludes to the story that the old king, the Salem king, told Santiago about the oil in the spoon. Remember this story? How the trick in life is to take in as many things without forgetting about the oil in the spoon. So again, this goes to show the differences between the Englishman and Santiago. They have similarities, but the differences, Santiago, he's talking to the camel drivers. He's paying attention to the desert and the vastness of it. The Englishman paying a lot of attention to his books. So they're both, I think, looking for their personal legend, but they're going about it in a different way. And then we're introduced to a camel driver. The camel driver is talking to Santiago, and he kind of tells him that, first of all, he mentions how he met his obligation to travel to Mecca, something that the crystal merchant didn't. Okay? And the camel driver says that, he had a seemingly successful life. He had land. He seemingly was a farmer, but all that was kind of lost due to flooding of the Nile River. So he had to find a way to earn a living, so he became a camel driver. And he said that all of this hardship taught him one thing: people need not fear the unknown if they are capable of achieving what they need and want. We are afraid of losing what we have, whether it's our life, our possessions, and property. Maktub. It is written. Here we're introduced on page 79 to something here. There was these strange hooded men that would appear. They were Bedouins who did surveillance along the caravan route. They provided warnings about thieves, barbarians, tribes. They came in silence, departed the same way. And we're going to find out that there are rumors of tribal warfare. Very interesting. When will we end up seeing some warfare out in the desert? That's what this guy is alluding to. And not necessarily between the caravan. I think he's talking about wars between rival tribes. So not really involving the caravan, but obviously you still got to be careful, it sounds like. So that's what I have on this slide. This is on page 80. Once you get into the desert, there's no going back, said the camel driver. And when you can't go back, you have to worry only about the best way of moving forward. And the rest is up to Allah, including the danger. Maktub. It is written. So this has come up a few times now. It is written. Santiago knew this word. The camel driver said it. Santiago learned it from the crystal merchant. So it is written. It is written. How is that fitting into all of this? The Englishman has his books. There's a universal language. It is written. Maybe that basically means like things just cycle through. There's nothing new under the sun. What has will be again. The famous saying from Ecclesiastes. There is this tense exchange on page 80 between the Englishman and Santiago. I'm going to read it for you guys. Quote, "You should pay more attention to the caravan," the boy said to the Englishman. "We make a lot of detours, but we're always heading for the same destination. And you ought to read more about the world. Books are like caravans in that respect." I interpret this as a tense exchange. Like they're both trying to make each other do what they are currently not. The Englishman wants Santiago to read his books. Santiago wants the Englishman to appreciate the caravan in the desert. So there's almost like this butting of heads of like, what's kind of the right thing to do here while you pass this time traveling across the desert. Very interesting. I think this is almost kind of like a tense exchange. There's nothing in here for me to really think that. That's just kind of how I could see the conversation going down. Like, well, you gotta read more books, kind of like that. Let's continue on. They talk about how they slept, animals on the outside, was it? The people slept in the center. There was armed sentinels on the fringes protecting them. Animals were around in a circle. And it seems like Santiago and the Englishman talk a little bit at night. Seems like Santiago informs the Englishman of all the great business that they brought in at the merchant shop. Englishman gets pretty interested in that. And he says, that's the principle that governs all things. In alchemy, it's called the soul of the world. When you want something with all your heart, that's when you are closest to the soul of the world. Always positive, and the soul works for you. And again, something that we've said a lot. What did the Salem King say? When you know your personal legend, the universe conspires to help you achieve it. Kind of similar to the soul of the world concept. Right? Really similar. And it's almost like that's what got Santiago, that's what brought the crystal merchant, rather, all that success back at his shop with Santiago at the helm. Let's continue on. I put here on page 82 that it seems like Santiago and the Englishman kind of make amends a little bit. They write, Paulo writes here, quote, that's the magic of omens, said the boy. I've seen how the guides read the signs of the desert and how the soul of the caravan speaks to the soul of the desert. The Englishman said, I'd better pay more attention to the caravan, and I'd better read your books, said the boy. So it seems like now they have like an understanding of each other. And maybe it took this soul of the world conversation to bring it together. Maybe the Englishman realizes a little more about what Santiago's all about. He appreciates the work he put in at the merchant shop. He appreciates that, he's looking for a treasure too. They both know about omens. Maybe I had this guy wrong from the beginning. Maybe I need to relax and try to get to know him a little better. Maybe I'll start paying attention to the caravan and the desert and the surroundings. And Santiago kind of appreciates that and says, you know what? I'm sorry I came off the way I did. Maybe I should read your books. Try to understand a little more about what you are looking for. So that was a pretty cool exchange. They kind of, I think they kind of made up a little bit. just from like a page back with that tense exchange. Again, I'm interpreting it as a tense exchange. So Santiago starts reading these books, and he doesn't really kind of get them. He says that they are strange books. They speak about weird things, Mercury, dragons, kings. He doesn't really kind of understand any of it. But he says there was one idea that seemed to repeat itself. All things are the manifestation of the one thing only. And that is similar to the chains. How everything is chained together in life. One thing follows another, and the universe is helping you out. It all stems from one thing. And maybe that one thing is your personal legend. So he kind of, what am I trying to say here? He figures this out from a book, from a tablet, the Emerald Tablet, which only contains a few lines. But it seems like the Emerald Tablet is like the only reading you really need to understand alchemy. You don't really need anything else, because the Englishman, well, you do need other things. So this is what the Englishman says. There's in alchemy contained only a few lines and had inscribed on the surface of an emerald. It's the Emerald Tablet, the Englishman says. Well, then why do you need all these books? Because the Emerald Tablet's got the few lines, the most important lines that you'll ever need. Englishman says so that we can understand those few lines. So you do need those other books, but you need those other books to understand the few lines in the Emerald Tablet. And it's interesting, there's this interesting phrase here, so that we understand those few lines, quote unquote. The Englishman answered without appearing to really believe what he had said. Interesting. So is he trying to lead Santiago astray here? I don't think so. No, I don't. I think this is different than a newcomer. I don't think he's trying to rob or, lie to Santiago here. I think, look, the Englishman probably knows a lot, but he still has a lot to learn. Right? So maybe he just doesn't have the confidence in that answer. So we get a little more description on these alchemists, that they believe that if a metal were heated for many years, it would free itself of all its individual properties. And what was left was the soul of the world. Remember that. The soul of the world. Something positive, something that works for you. When you want something that's close to your heart. Soul of the world. That's what you get when you melt down these metals. And the soul of the world is connected to the universal language that we've heard a lot in this book so far. It says here, the soul of the world allowed them to understand anything on the face of the earth, because it was the language with which all things communicated. They called that discovery the Masterwork. It was part liquid, part solid. So what is the Masterwork? So we have the soul of the world, the Masterwork, which is part liquid, part solid. The Masterwork comes from the soul of the world. But I'm still not really sure what the Masterwork is. I think we're going to find this out here. Okay, let's see. The Masterwork was split up into two parts, it sounds like. The boy learned that the liquid part of the Masterwork was called the Elixir of Life. And did I mention this before? Yes, okay. There was a liquid and a solid part. The liquid part was called the Elixir of Life. It cured illness. It kept you from growing old. Sounds like a fountain of youth kind of thing. The solid part was called the Philosopher's Stone. And remember, this is originally how we are introduced to the Englishman. He's looking for the Philosopher's Stone. He's looking for the alchemist so that the alchemist can kind of show him where the philosopher's stone is. And the philosopher's stone can turn metal into gold. So think about how rich you can be if you find that thing. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty cool. You could have money as long as you had the metal, turn that into gold, turn that into money. Not a bad investment. Santiago, though, is a little lost on this. There's soul of the world, universal language, masterwork, elixir of life, philosopher's stones. Lots of terms being thrown out here. Santiago is getting a little bit lost because the books that he's reading, he doesn't really understand them. There's obscure texts, coded instructions, drawings. He doesn't see why they can't just come out and say, hey, this is how you find the masterwork. But the books and all these old texts, the knowledge from the older alchemists has been codified. It's not very easy to understand. And Santiago's wondering here, like, why do they have to make things so complicated? He's becoming irritable. And he's missing the books that he reads. He doesn't want to read these Englishman's books anymore. He's just getting more and more frustrated because he can't understand it. But the Englishman says, the reason that they make these so complicated is that so that those who have the responsibility for understanding can understand. Imagine if everyone went around transforming lead into gold. Gold would lose its value. It's an interesting point there, supply and demand. I mean, if the supply of gold is through the roof, it's not going to be valued nearly as much. Okay. But also, maybe there's a purpose as to why things were codified, why they were drawings instead of written out instructions. And maybe that's to thin the herd a little bit. Only those who really want it are going to find it out. So the weak-minded or the not as diligent, well, then they're just going to be filtered out of the way. And only a true alchemist is going to be able to find this masterwork, be able to utilize the philosopher's stone, utilize the elixir of life. Right? Remember in the Gospels, Jesus always spoke to the people in parables. He never really told them the messages, like the meaning behind the messages. Right? And he mentioned, though, that to his disciples, he was way more straightforward with them. Similarly, Morpheus in The Matrix, the movie, one of my favorite movies, he can explain to Neo what the Matrix is, but Neo doesn't really fully understand it until he's actually in it. Until he actually crosses over into the real world. Then he can see the world for what it really is. I think same applies in this situation. You don't want just anybody finding the masterwork. You want the right person to find the masterwork. Else you could have somebody who finds a philosopher's stone and use it for very selfish reasons. That can't be too good. We get again on page 85 another echo of war, a coming war. I still don't really know what this is. We're not gonna, I'll tell you, if by page 90 we're still not really going to have an idea of what this coming war is. But we do know that Santiago seems like he's learning a lot from the books. Okay, that's good. The Englishman, though, says that he's not really learning a lot from the Caravan. His mind is kind of elsewhere. He's starting to think about this possible war. His mind is kind of elsewhere. I think he's trying, but this war thing is really interesting, and I don't know what that is going to involve. But obviously, it's keeping the Englishman up at night. One day, the Englishman asks Santiago if he has learned anything, and Santiago responds, "Well, I have. I've learned that alchemists have realized their personal legend. I've learned about the soul of the world, this masterwork, which is divided up into the Philosopher's Stone, Elixir of Life." And the Englishman gets like kind of upset. Even though all these things like Santiago just responded with, these are all like true things that he's learned from the books, talking to the Englishman, but the Englishman thinks Santiago has not learned that much. And he seems disappointed about it. And I don't know if the Englishman is just maybe disappointed in his efforts to learn about the caravan in the desert, that he's kind of projecting on Santiago a little bit here. But I think, like, give Santiago some credit. Like, he came into this not knowing much about alchemy, and he's reading about the Emerald Tablet, Masterwork. I mean, this is all foreign language to him. Seems like he's come a long way, but still the Englishman's kind of holding him to this high bar, which I think might be a little bit unfair, but he says, "Go back to watching the Caravan. That didn't teach me anything either." And here Santiago, instead of getting angry with the Englishman, says, everyone has his or her own way of learning things. His way isn't the same as mine, nor mine is his, but we're both in search of our personal legends, and I respect him for that. So see, they're both going for their personal legend. They're just both doing it in different ways. War begins on page 86. And we still don't really know much about this, other than it says here the war between the tribes had begun. And that's all we know. The Camel Driver, though, seemed not to be very concerned with the threat of war. And he says, I'm alive. I'm only concerned with the present, what's right in front of me. When I'm eating, that's all I think about. If I'm on the march, that's all I think about. If I have to fight, it will be just as good a day to die as any other. And he continues on, because I don't live in either my past or my future. I'm only interested in the present. Life will be a party for you, a grand festival, because life is the moment we're living right now. So he's basically saying, hey, I'm just focused on me, on the right now, what's in front of me. I got to get across this desert. I'm responsible for all these animals, all these people. I can't worry about the future. I can't worry about the war. Who sounds like they need this advice? The Englishman. He's worried about the war. He's worried about so many external things. Oh, Santiago hasn't learned anything. Oh my gosh, this coming war. Oh my gosh, am I going to actually find the alchemist out here in this oasis? Just do you. Read your books, study, take it one thing at a time. They finally come to the oasis. They finally reach the oasis on like page 87, 88. And here we get a first glimpse of the Alchemist. This little we switch views to the Alchemist point of view here, because it says the times rushed past, and so the caravans thought the Alchemist as you watch the hundreds of people and animals arriving at the oasis. This is kind of like the sections, how Paulo writes this. He does have parts or like chapters, like we are in part 2 here, but he'll divide this up into like sections. He'll split off, and we get this new perspective on this alchemist here. And it's interesting. We're introduced to him. We still don't really know a lot about him, because this is the end here, guys. This is like page 89, 90 right here. But he knows already that he's got to look for a man that's in these new arrivals that are coming into the Oasis. He's looking for a man that he's going to teach his secrets to. And the omen, he says this, the omens had told him so. So the alchemist knows about omens too. Okay, maybe that's not surprising because the Englishman knew about the omens. It seems like he thinks he shouldn't have to. It seems like he doesn't want to teach anybody his secrets because God reveals his secrets to all his creatures. And it's funny, it's that he says, sometimes this can be conveyed by pictures or by words. Think about the book and how Santiago is getting frustrated with the drawings, the codes. And the alchemist here, when we're looking at it from his perspective, is like, well, the secret's right there. It's not always going to be in perfect, picture perfect words or like clear instructions. It sounds like you have to have like a good relationship with yourself and God to have these secrets revealed to you. And the alchemist alludes to this fact. The fact that words and pictures and things can lead you astray. He writes here on page 90, he had only one explanation for this fact. Things have to be transmitted this way because they were made from the pure life, and this kind of life cannot be captured in pictures or words. Because people become fascinated with pictures and words and wind up forgetting the language of the world. And this is what Santiago is frustrated about. Why isn't this book telling me the answers? Well, let's flip that. Why? What answers is the book trying to get from you? How much more soul searching do you have to do before you come across your personal legend? It's not about the book, it's about you. Why aren't you seeing the forest from the trees? Right? Is there some more development inside yourself that you have to do in order for the answer to be revealed to you in those pictures, in those codes? Right? People become fascinated with pictures and words. They wind up forgetting the language of the world, that universal language. Again, mentioned here. So now we're getting some places. This is a very interesting section. Hopefully for next time, guys, we will read page 90 through 110. Hopefully get a little better picture of who this alchemist is. This universal language, the Masterwork, Philosopher's Stone, lots of things being thrown at us right now. But the fact is, whether you're the Englishman or Santiago, you made a choice, and you're on the right path. You're on the caravan. So you know you're moving in a good direction. Stay the course and follow the star, just like these guys are. And you'll realize your personal legend. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Again, page 90 through 110 for next time. My name is Chris. You've been listening to Chee-Tash. Thank you, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.